Thank you, Reverend Doctor, for inviting me to read a few passages from my speeches and articles about the struggle for women's suffrage. Now, I'm no poet, but I'm going to open my talk with something I wrote a long time ago. To the wrongs that need resistance, to the right that needs assistance, to the future in the distance, give yourselves. And give, women and men did. For myself, who has devoted over 40 years of my life to the women's suffrage effort, and for the millions of members of the National American Woman Suffrage Association, along with the countless women who went before us, it's been a long, hard struggle, but it was worth it. The 19th Amendment, Votes for Women, has been ratified and was adopted on August 26th of 1920. My remarks today have to do with the time just before this historic event, including the Great War and the final Women's Suffrage Convention in February of 1920, where we recognized those who would be listed on our roll of honor, and we held the first official gathering of the new League of Women Voters, the mission of which is to educate women voters without regard to race, religion, or gender. The battle for the vote had been hard and bitterly fought. We campaigned and lobbied in the states and in Washington, working tirelessly in our undertakings for support. There were barbers' days, days for firemen, street cleaners, bankers, businessmen, clergymen, streetcar men, factory workers, students, restaurant and railroad workers, lawyers, ditch diggers, and longshoremen. No voter escaped. On the positive side, we had every kind of woman, including college and professional women who were employed, owned property, and made contributions to the campaign funds not possible in earlier years. In this, women gathered a self-reliance their mothers had not known. They organized, waged their campaigns with better strategies and more assurance, and by 1920, every woman in America and 20 other countries had the vote, enjoying a freedom of which their grandmothers never dreamed. There had been rifts in the movement, and I was tired, but still I said, as your president, I will do my best. Let us get together and sink differences. Let organization be the watchword of the year. Let us make our slogan, get together. 1916 was a presidential election year, and I was optimistic. But in the end, I experienced deceit, crisis, and disappointment due to the liquor interests and erratic practices in elections. Nevertheless, at the 1917 NASA conference in Washington, I could feel suffrage on the rise and said, "Women's suffrage is inevitable, and you know it. Shall we then be enemies or friends?" But now, much of our work had to be set aside in order to support our husbands, sons, fathers, and brothers in the Great War. During 1917 and 18, women sold Liberty bonds, flocked to plant gardens, dry food and canned vegetables and fruit. We made bandages, knit socks, and worked in the factories while our nation was engaged in the defense of democracy. But I noted the hearts of women would beat more happily if they could feel that our own government had been true to the standard it proposes to unfurl upon the international field. We demand the suffrage by federal amendment in the United States as our war measure. President Woodrow Wilson watched, listened, and was won over. We knew the day of triumph of the federal suffrage amendment was at hand. On November 11th, 1918, the Great War ended with the hope that democracy would prevail abroad. But in America, women would not be enfranchised to vote for another 2 years. 12 days before the war's end, I wrote the following in the October issue of The Crisis, the official magazine of the NAACP. Over in Europe, the greatest war that history has ever known is shaking the foundations of kingdoms and empires. Millions of men have been blown to atoms in this titanic struggle. Billions of dollars have been burned up in the smoke of its battles. The whole world is locked in the struggle, and the struggle is to the death. What is it all about? We all know the answer. Every soldier who straps on his knapsack, every mother or wife who weeps to see him go, every woman who steps forward to take his place in industry, even the little child who is lifted to kiss him goodbye, knows the answer. For democracy, the great ideal, the democratic faith that is sustaining alike the men of the Allied armies on the battlefields of Europe, also sustains the women of the world, waging their own double struggle to meet the new economic demands upon them while trying to secure a voice in their own government. And just as the world war is no white man's war, but every man's war, so is the struggle for women's suffrage no white woman's struggle, but every woman's struggle. Men have counted women out of the political salvation of the world, but women do count. Everybody counts in applying democracy until every responsible and law-abiding adult in it, without regard to sex, race, color, or creed, has his or her own inalienable and unpurchasable voice in the government. The question remains, how are we to apply democracy when capital clashes with labor, class clashes with class, man-made laws are imposed on women who are denied all voice in the lawmaking? Yet everywhere that democratic ideal, the light that beckons, moves on ahead of us. With all its failures and delays, we will not give up, knowing that the cure for the ills of democracy is more democracy. As suffragists, we believe that the vote will do women good and that women will do politics good. And with the broad application of democracy that knows no bias on the ground of race, color, creed, or sex, Americans may stand united, not as Irish Americans or German Americans, Negro Americans, Slav Americans, or the women, but one and all as Americans for America. In May of 1919, at the hearing for the 19th Amendment in the House, men so ill they ought to be in bed were on hand to answer the roll call. It passed in both houses and went on to the ratification process in anticipation of the long-awaited day of federal triumph. Finally, on February 13th, 1920, at the opening session of what we believed would be the last convention of the National American Woman Suffrage Association, I made this speech. Women, be glad today. Since we met a little less than a year ago in the 50th annual convention of our association, we have all known that the end of our long struggle was near. We knew this without a reservation or a doubt. We comprehended the truth of Victor Hugo's sage epigram, there is one thing more powerful than kings and empires and armies. It is the idea whose time has come to move. Since that date, as state after state has joined the list of the ratified, we have seen our idea, our cause move forward dramatically, majestically into its appropriate place as part of the construction of our nation. Our final victory is due, is inevitable, is almost here. Let us celebrate today. I beg you to celebrate the occasion when the proclamation comes with joyous demonstrations, one national and one a state day, making an end of the denial of political freedom for women. Ours has been a movement with a soul, a dauntless, unconquerable soul ever leading on. Women came, served, and passed on, but others came to take their places, while the same great soul was ever marching on through hundreds, nay, thousands of years. A soul immortal, directing, leading the women's crusade to the liberation of the mothers of the race. That soul is here today. And who shall say that all the hosts of the millions of women who have toiled and hoped and met delay are not here today and joining in the rejoicing that their cause at last has won its triumph? Women, be glad today. There will never come another day like this. Let the joy be unconfined, and let it speak so clearly that its echo will be heard around the world and find its way into the soul of every woman of any and every race and nationality who is yearning for the opportunity and the liberty still denied them. Join me in a rousing cheer. Are you ready? Hip, hip, hooray! Thank you. And don't forget to vote.